Shalom everyone, hope everyone's doing well. Bezat Hashem, today we're going to be reviewing this past week's Gemara in Masechet Sanhedrin, which begins on Tetvav Mud Aleph, the bottom of the page, 2 dots at the bottom, Shor Niskal Be'esrim Mishlosha, and we'll finish at the end of the parak, which is the end of the first parak, Yurchet Mud Aleph, towards the top of the page, roughly 2.5 dapim. We're going to have 5 main sections in today's learning. As always, our learning should be as a refuah shlema, a merit for refuah shlema for Yaakov ben Dinah. We should hear of his speedy, quick, and full recovery soon, and only b'sarot tovot. Now, we begin the review on Tetvav Mud Aleph 15a, the bottom of the page, Shor Niskal Be'esrim Mishlosha, Shene'emar. So this is the quoting the Mishnah where we had said that the Shor Niskal, if there's a situation where an ox kills somebody, so the halacha is that when the ox is adjudicated to be put to death through skila, it's called Shor Niskal, you need a court of 23 to put it to death. So the Mishnah had said, Shor Niskal Be'esrim Mishlosha Shene'emar. How do we know that a Shor Niskal is judged by 23? As it says, Hashor Yisakel V'gam Ba'alav Yumat. It says, the ox will be stoned and also the owners will die. So the Mishnah told us, just like the owners, if they were to kill somebody, because they're not actually killed over here, so they'd be adjudicated by a capital court of 23. Also, the ox, if it's being put to death, it needs to be judged by a court of 23. Now, the way we understand the drasha is, since it's not learned kipshuto, mitata ba'alim, meaning that the owner's actually killed, so obviously it's there for a drasha, which is to teach us that the Shor Niskal is adjudicated by a court of 23. So Amalei Abai l'Rav, Abai turned to Rav and he said, I don't understand how you know you can't learn the pasuk kipshuto. Because how do you know that the drasha is, as we explained, to teach us that if the owner is not killed, obviously it's there for something else, to teach us that the ox is adjudicated by a court of 23. Turning to Tetvav Mud Bet. Maybe that's the chidush. The chidush of the pasuk is to tell us actually the owner doesn't pay money, but actually the owner's put to death. If his money kills, his ox kills, he's chayav mita. Maybe learn the pasuk kipshuto. So Rav answered him, if that was true, lichtov v'gam ba'alav. It could have said the ox is killed and also the owner, and I would have known what does it mean also the owner? The owner is killed. V'lishto can be quiet. So the fact that it writes yumat is an extra terminology which teaches us not that the owner is killed, rather the owner pays, and the fact that it writes all of this is only to teach us that the ox is adjudicated by a court of 23. The Gemara says, but wait a second, that's not a proof, because it could not have said that, because ikatav rachmana achi, if the Torah would have only said v'gam be'alav, hava amin, I would have said biskila. Maybe I would have said that the owner of the animal receives skila, just like the ox itself, also the owner receives skila. Maybe really the owner is killed, and maybe he receives skila as opposed to chenek, which would be the normative punishment. Meaning, as Rashi explains, because usually when the Torah talks about death, it refers to chenek. So maybe that's the chidush, is that really the owner is put to death. It couldn't have just written v'gam ba'alav, because then I think the owner receives skila, and therefore it writes yumat to teach us that he receives chenek, choking, strangulation. So the Gemara says, "B'skila sal kadata." Would have ever entered your mind to say such a thing, that the owner would receive skila if his animal kills? Katal iu b'sayif. We know that the halacha is, if a person kills someone else, he gets sayif, which is a lower level of punishment, death by beheading. Mamono b'skila. Would it have ever entered your mind to say that if his money kills, means his ox kills somebody, he receives skila? Obviously that doesn't make sense, and therefore it must be the pshat in the pasuk is, like we explained, which is not that the owner is killed, but rather it's to teach us that the ox is adjudicated by a court of 23. So the Gemara says, no, let's reinstate the question. Maybe really it says yumat, it's referring to the owner getting killed. Why does it have to say it? To be lenient on the owner. He does get killed, but is that unlike if he would kill, he'd get sayif, which is beheading. If his ox killed, maybe he gets chenek, like the normal punishments in the Torah, strangulation, which is less severe. So the Gemara says, if you say, like the Shita says, chenek is more strict, so then it wouldn't be logical to say that if he would kill, he'd get saif, but the Torah is teaching us he gets chenek. That doesn't make sense. But according to the Shita, it says that chenek is actually more strict. they're more lenient, excuse me. So maybe what the Torah is teaching us is that the owner is killed, but he's not killed with saif, he's killed with chenek, Michael Meimar. So how do you know to make the drasha then that the ox receives adjudication with 23? Maybe it's to teach us that the owner actually gets chenek. So the Gemara answers, Lo sal kadatach, don't let that into your mind, because we know the pasuk tells us regarding this shor niskal, im kofar yushat alav. It says, if he shall pay an atonement for the value of the person who was killed by his ox. Now, if you think that he's actually put to death, like we're implying, the problem is the Torah tells us, you're not allowed to take payment if somebody murders somebody else. So obviously he's not liable to death because he's paying, and you're not allowed to take payment if somebody's liable to death. The Gemara says, but no, that's not true. Adarabah, the opposite, mishum gufa. Maybe that's exactly what it's teaching you. Katal iyu, that if he kills somebody, lo tiskilei b'mamona el b'ktala, he can't pay his way out, rather he has to be put to death. But maybe what it's teaching you, chidush, when his ox kills is, katal shoro, when his ox kills, he's really liable to death, but lifrok nafshei b'mamona. Maybe what it's saying is he could pay out his way of death, which would be chenek, as we explained, with paying money. Elamar Chizkiah, rather Chizkiah says, the reason it can't be teaching us that the owner is put to death and it's ruchenek, like we explained, and rather it's used to teach us the ox is adjudicated with a court of 23, is v'chein tanut v'chizkiah markra, because the pasuk says clearly this idea. It says mot yumat hamakeh. It says the one who murdered will be put to death. And it says rotzeachu, he is a murderer. Extra terminology. Why does it teach that? It teaches only if a man murders is he put to death. To exclude that if his ox kills, he's not put to death. So obviously the pshat in the pasuk must be that it's not there to teach us this idea that he's put to death, the owner is put to death with chenek, as we explained, but rather it must be it's to teach us that the ox is adjudicated with a court of 23. Asks the Gemara Sheila. Ibailu, Shor Sinai Bekama, when there was the rule by Har Sinai that animals were not allowed to approach the mountain, if it would, how many judges were necessary to put it to death? Mi Gamar Sha'ami Dorot, do we derive that temporary measure from the future generations, meaning 23? Or lo, or maybe not. Tashmas, the Gemara is bring a proof. The Tani Ram Bar Yecheskel, Im Behema Im Ish Lo Yechye. It says there, whether it's an animal or a man who approaches the mountain, he shall not live. Ma'ish b'chaf gimel, af be'ema b'chaf gimel, just as a man would be put to death at 23, also, if the animal would approach the mountain, also be adjudicated in a court of 23. All right, now the Mishnah had told us, we had a machloket here. The Tanakama had said that if a wild animal that's owned by a person, a lion, a wolf, including a snake actually, if they need to be adjudicated, you need a court of 23, and Rabbi Eliezer said, no. Anyone who kills it, anybody that kills it is meritorious. So we have two ways of explaining this shita of Rabbi Eliezer. Amar Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish explains like this. It's only a machloket where the animal actually killed somebody. So there the Tanakama says it needs to be adjudicated by a 23-person court. Rabbi Eliezer says you can use, anyone who kills it immediately is effective. But if not, you would not be allowed to kill it. Now, Alma, we see clearly Rabbi Eliezer holds then, and really it's agreed upon, which is kasavar yeshlem tarbut v'yeshlem baalim, that these wild animals could be tamed, and therefore they have owners, they're not considered hefker, that anybody could just go and kill them. Rabbi Yochanan argues, that's not the pshat in the Mishnah. He says, even if the animals didn't kill these wild animals, Rabbi Eliezer would hold his position, and he would say, you, Tanakama, are saying it's only when it killed, and then it's adjudicated by a court of 23. Even if it didn't kill, anybody's allowed to kill it. Alma kasavar, so we see that then Rabbi Eliezer would hold, ein lahem tarbut ve'ein lahem baalim. The wild animals cannot be tamed, and therefore they're considered hefker, not owned by their owners, and anybody's allowed to kill them because they're considered dangerous. Tanan, so the Gemara says, let's look at the Mishnah and see which explanation is more logical. Rabbi Eliezer said in the Mishnah, Kol hakodem lo argan zach, anybody that kills them is meritorious. Now, Bishlam Rabbi Yochanan, according to Rabbi Yochanan, explains Rabbi Eliezer's shita is even before it killed anybody. Lemai zacha. So, when the person's killing it, it's not something that was liable to be put to death by a court, and when he kills it, the skin of the animal is still something that he could merit in. So lamai zacha zacha la'oran. It could be that he merits in the hides of the animals. El Reish Lakish lamai zacha. But according to Reish Lakish, if it only is where it killed that Rabbi Eliezer says you're allowed to go and kill it, how can anybody merit in it? Kivan she'mitosh avinu rabbanan k'man degamar dinayu va'isurei ananinu. Just like if it was put to death by the court, it's a sor nana'ah, it's like shor niskal. So too, if someone else killed it, it's in place of the court, you're not allowed to benefit from it. So how could anybody benefit? What does it mean, zacha? So the Gemara answers, It doesn't mean he's zoche actually in the item, but rather, my zacha l'shamayim, means he did something meritorious to heaven because he removed the dangerous force on this world. Tana kavate de Reish Lakish. The Gemara says we have a brayta that supports Reish Lakish. Echad shor shemit, whether it's an ox that killed somebody, v'echad be'ema v'chaya, or any other animal, shemito, that killed, v'chav gimel, it has to be judged by 23 people to put it to death. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, that's Tana Kama. Rabbi Eliezer says, shor shemit be'esrim v'shlosha. If it's an ox that killed, you need 23. V'shar be'ema v'chaya shemito, but other animals that killed, kol hakodem l'organ zacha ben l'shamayim, he merits to heaven if he kills it, anybody kills it, because those are considered something dangerous. This is which reflects the position of Reish Lakish. Rabbi Akiva Omer in the Mishnah, we had a third opinion. Rabbi Akiva said that he said you need a court of 23. So the Gemara says Rabbi Akiva had a Tanakama. It's the same as the Tanakama. So the Gemara says nachash. The difference would be nachash regarding the snake. According to the Tanakama, snake is like the other wild animals. You need a court of 23 to adjudicate. According to Rabbi Akiva, there's a distinction, as Rashi quotes the Gemara in Baba Kama, that says, Nachash is muad le'olam. It's always considered a dangerous animal, regardless. It can't be tamed. And therefore, kol hakodem, anybody that goes and proceeds and kills it is zoche. Let's move on now to the second section. The Gemara now discusses the next section of the Mishnah, which is regarding the activities or the specific people that were judged by a court of 71, by the Sanhedrin Agdola. So the first one, what said was, if a shevet, it needs to be judged, they're judged by the high court, the Supreme Court. So the Gemara says, Ein danin v'chulei. Hai shevet techata b'mai. So what avera are we talking about where a tribe did, the shevet did, that needs judgment that the 71-person court would adjudicate? Ilim shevet shechilel Shabbat. If it is talking about chilul Shabbat because of the severity of Shabbat, so maybe if it's all shevet, it requires the higher level court and not the court of 23 like individuals. But Eimer de paligrachmana ben yechidin l'merubin. We know that there's a distinction between individual sinners and the public. That's only l'nyana avodat kochavim, as we're about to mention regarding irani dachat when a whole city does it. But b'shar mitzvot mi palig, is there any distinction by other mitzvot? Even by chilul Shabbat, we don't find this distinction. Ella, so the Gemara says maybe it's exactly that. B'shevet sheudach. It's talking about an entire tribe of the Jewish people that went and did avodah zarah. So the Gemara says this would imply that they would require a shevet is like a city in the sense that it would be judged like the city that does avodah zarah, but the Gemara says that can't be because Keman lo Rabbi Yoshia v'lo Rabbi Yonatan. It's not like either of the opinions. The Tanya, as the Braita teaches, at kama asini arni dachat. Until what point would you have enough people to be an irani dachat, a city that sinned in avodah zarah and therefore is adjudicated by the Sanhedrin Gdola? So miyud v'ad kuf div Rabbi Yoshia. Rabbi Yoshia says it has to be a city of 10 members till 100 members, but not more than that. Rabbi Yonatan omer mikuf v'ad rubo shel shevet. It has to be from 100 until the majority of a shevet, but not the majority of the shevet. So the Gemara says, what do you see? Va'afilu Rabbi Yonatan lo ka'amar elarubo. Rabbi Yonatan says only if it's a majority of a shevet, until a majority of a shevet, that you would adjudicate with the Supreme Court. Aval kula lo, but regarding an entire shevet, it doesn't sound like it. So that can't be when you would judge the shevet by the court of 71. So the Gemara says the first accepted answer, Amar Matna Hacha, turning to Tet Zayin Wud Aleph, Benasi shevet shachat askinan. We're talking about when there's the nasi of a shevet who sinned. Milo Amar of Adabar Ahav, we're going to bring this drasha later. Kol adavar gadol yaviu elecha. When Yitro told Moshe, all of the great things we brought to you, it didn't mean the severe cases, but rather it meant Dvarav shel gadol. It means the matters of the great ones, of the leaders. We'll see like Kohen Gadol, including the Nasi. So Hainami, this also Gadol, this is considered something of a leader, of a Nasi, which is adjudicated by a court of 71, reflective of Moshe Rabbeinu. That's what the Mishnah means. Ula Amar, Ula says, Rabbi Eliezer, B'ba'in al iskein, Ula Amar, Rabbi Eliezer, Ula says, Rabbi Elazar, B'ba'in al iskein achalot. So he gives another attempted answer, which is that it's where people, Shvatim, are arguing regarding the boundaries of the divisions of property. And it's adjudicated like the beginning of the divisions. Just as originally it was divided up by the Sanhedrin Gdola, so to redivide it, if there's some sort of a dispute, you also need a court of 71. The Gemara says, 1 second. If that's true, you had other items involved, which is the box with the lotteries. We'll speak more about that later. You had the Urim Tumim, the special koach behind the Choshen HaMishpat, and you had all the Jews there. Afkan Kalfi Urim Tumim B'chol Yisrael. So you should know all of those things also. But the mission doesn't say that. Rather, Rav Matna's answer is more acceptable. Ravina says a second answer that's accepted. He says, really we're talking about a tribe that went off and did avodah zarah. But you asked, is it true that they're adjudicated like the majority of people who do avodah zarah? We said it's not true because that's only a smaller number. The Gemara says actually it is true. They receive the death penalty of individuals who do avodah zarah, meaning they get skila, not sayif, which would be Saif would be if it's the Irani Dachan. So they get skila like individuals, but they're judged, they are adjudicated by the Supreme Court, by the 71-person court, in terms of the outcome. Because Milo Amar Cham Bar Yossi, Amar Vashaya, it says by Avodah Zarah, you bring out the man or the woman by the individuals, and we derive from that, Ish Visha Tamotzilish Arecha, that if you have someone who does Avodah Zarah as an individual, you bring them to a court of 23. But not if it's an entire city. So Chanami, it's the same thing here. Meaning, if an entire shevet sins with avodah zarah, as the second answer that's accepted here, it would have to be adjudicated by a court of 71. Let's continue. Loed Navi HaSheker. We said in the Mishnah, Navi HaSheker, which is a Navi, a prophet who prophesies in the name of Hashem, which is not true, he is adjudicated also by the court of 71. Menani, how do we know this? Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina, Atya Zada Zada mi Zaken Mamre. So we have Gzera Shava from Zaken Mamre. By Zaken Mamre, we know Mala Alan b'Shivim ve'echad. Just as there he has to rebel against the 71-person court to be found guilty and put to death. Hafkan b'Shivim ve'echad. So to here, the adjudication of a Navi Sheker is also going to be done through a court of 71. The problem with this drasha is regarding the Zaken Mamre, it says the word Azada, not where he rebels against the Sanhedrin, which is 71, but by his death, which is only with 23. So you can't bring that as the source that the Navi HaSheker is adjudicated by 71. Elam Reish Lakish, so rather Reish Lakish says a different pshat, which is Gamar Davar mi Mehamra Ato. We find by the rebellion of the Zaken Mamre used the word Davar, and it also used the word Davar by the Navi HaSheker. So now we derive, just as the rebellion of Zaken Mamre is with 71, also the Navi HaSheker is adjudicated with 71. Asks the Gemara, V'lahadar Zaken Mamre v'ligmar Azada Azada mi Navi Sheker. Once you say this, so why don't you bring back the drasha using Azada Azada to teach us that in order for the Zaken Mamre to be put to death, he also was put to death with a 71. Right? So the Gemara answers, Davar, Davar, Gamir, Azada, Azada, lo Gamir. Davar, Davar is the Gzera Shava we have tradition from, but Azada, Azada, we don't have that tradition, so we can't make that drasha. Now, the third item in this list was Kohen Gadol. Loet Kohen Gadol. Kohen Gadol is not adjudicated if he does something that would be liable for capital punishment, only in the court of 71. So we're in Benanimili. How do we know this? Ravada Barahava the Amar Kra, because the pasuk tells us, Kol Davar Gadol Yaviu Elech. We brought this above. Yitro told Moshe, any great thing is brought to you. So the way we explain this, Ravada Barahava says, it means not that it's a severe matter or a great matter, but rather, Dvarav Shel Gadol. It means if you have a matter of a great person, like we spoke out before, Nasi or Kohen Gadol, that's brought to Moshe Rabbeinu, i.e. a 71-person court. Meitav asked the Gemara Kashma Braita, but one second, the Braita doesn't learn this way, because the Braita says, Davar Gadol, Davar Kashet, means something that's a serious matter, not the words, the matters of a serious person, like the Kohen Gadol. You want to tell me it means a serious matter, or maybe it means even the matter of Kohen Gadol. Later it says in the outcome that the serious matters are brought to Moshe, Hare Davar Kashamor. So you see clearly, what does it mean is that the serious matters were brought to Moshe. So the Gemara says, you see clearly this Braita does not learn like Ravada Barahava's explanation. Answers the Gemara, it's true, but there's another Braita that supports him. The Tanya, as the Braita says, Davar Gadol, Dvarav Shel Gadol, Davar Gadol means Dvarav of the great person, means of the Kohen Gadol. Not Maybe it means that it's a severe matter, but not that the Kohen Gadol is adjudicated by the court of 71. So the Chidush is, no, but later it says Davar Kasher, Hare Davar Kasham, where that's referring to severe matters. Hamani Mekayem Davar Gadol. So why does it have to say it twice? And earlier it says Davar Gadol, Dvarav Shel Gadol, it means matters of the Kohen Gadol are adjudicated by the court of 71. Asks the Gemara, V'haitana, the first Braita, who learns it's the same thing. Trei Kra Lamali. So why does it have to say it twice? So one is the command to Moshe, and one is the performance. The Idach and the second Braita responds, if that's true, L'chtov o gadol gadol lo kashe kashe, it should write the same word twice. The fact that it changes it means it's two different things. One is that Moshe would deal with the more serious matters, and that he would adjudicate the cases for Kohen Gadol or the Nasi as we spoke about. My gadol my kashesh mamina tarti, both ideas. By Rabbi Elazar asked the following question: Shoro shel kohen gadol bekama. If a kohen gadol's ox kills somebody, how many people would be necessary to adjudicate that case? Do we say lemitat ba'alim didei medamin alei? We compare it to its owner, and therefore, just as his owner would require 71-person court, the kohen gadol, also the ox needs to be that. Or we compare it to a general owner, which would be a 23. Abai noted the fact that Rabbi Elazar only asked this question regarding the ox killing, which is a capital issue, that it's obvious regarding monetary matters that the Kohen Gadol would only be adjudicated with a court of 3, like normal. The Gemara is obvious, that's what he's saying. So the Gemara says, so you might think, since it says all of the great person's matters, so you might think Kol Dvarav Shel Gadol, that even monetary matters of a Kohen Gadol are adjudicated with the highest level court. So Kamash Malan, that's what Abai is saying. That's not the pshat, which is by monetary cases, it's like a normal person. Okay, let's move on now to the third section. So we said in the Mishnah that in order to go out to Melchemet HaReshut, a voluntary war, they had to consult with a court of 71. Menani Mili, how do we know this? Amar B'Yavod, Amar Kar, the Pasuk says when Moshe instates Yoshua ben Nun into service and commands him about war, it says, V'lifnei Elazar HaKohen Ya'amod, in front of Elazar HaKohen, who would be the future Kohen Gadol, he shall stand, Yoshua. Who in the Pasuk is Melech? It refers to the king, which is Yoshua. All the Jews with him, Zemashuach Milchama, refers to the special Kohen of war. It says all the congregations, Sanhedrin, this refers to the Sanhedrin. So this seems to imply, the Gemara understands, that when you go out to war, you have to consult with the Sanhedrin. The Gemara says that's not a true raya, because Vidilma perhaps was Sanhedrin, maybe what the Pasuk is really saying is, only great people, including the Sanhedrin, could consult with the Urim Tumim. But otherwise, you're not allowed to, and this has nothing to do with consulting the Sanhedrin to go out to Melchemet Reshut. Ella, the Gemara says, rather proven from here. The Gemara in Brachot says, Ki hadda Amar Rav Acha bar Bizna Amar Rav Shimon Chasida, Ki no hayatalo elamal mitato shel David, that there was a harp above the bed of David. Ki even she'egia chatzot laila, middle of the night would come Rach Tzfonit Nashevet bo. There would be a northern wind that would blow through it. Va'ayam minagen me'elav, and it would play by itself. David would get up and he would learn Torah till the daybreak. When the first lights of the rays of light came out, the Chachamim, the wise men of the Jews, came by him. They would say to him, it's not like all the time, but sometimes this would happen, and they would say, your nation needs sustenance. And then he would say, let them do business with each other. So they would say to him, it's two expressions that they don't have enough sustenance in society to take care of themselves. So then go fight and conquer territories and use their resources. They would consult with the strategist of war, which was Achitofel. This is the point. And then they would take counsel from the Sanhedrin, take permission, and then they would ask the Urim Tumim. What's the source in the Pasuk for this order? It says, after Achitofel, Benayahu ben Yoyada, Vavyeter. It says first Achitofel, then Benayahu ben Yoyada, and then Vavyeter, the Tzva Melech Yoav, and afterwards the officer of the king, which was Yoav. Achitofel Zeyoetz. Achitofel refers to the strategist of war. Like it says, Achitofel Sheya Atz V'Gomer. Benayahu ben Yoyada, when it refers to Benayahu ben Yoyada as the Sanhedrin, he was the head of the Sanhedrin. So that was consulting with them, which is the proof to our halacha. Avyeter was the Kohen Gadol, so refers to the Urim Tumim. Like it says, Benayahu ben Yoyada, they would ask Benayahu ben Yoyada, and then ala creative ala pleti, they would ask the Urim Tumim. Why is the Urim Tumim called creative pleti? Creative shekortin divrei, and they had succinct short words, clear. Upleti shemufleim ma'aseh, because their deeds were wondrous. And afterwards, Sarat Tzava Melech Yoav, they would have the war general, which was Yoav, and they would go out to war. What's the source in the Pasuk? David would wake up in this way, because it says in the Pasuk in Tehillim, Urach Fodi, my honor should wake up, meaning my neshama wakes up to serve Hashem. Ura Neil v'kinor, the harp and the zalter, it's called, some sort of a harp, arouses me. Ha'ira Shachar, I wake up before the morning to serve Hashem. Let's continue. We said in the Mishnah that you're not allowed to add on to the city of Yerushalayim or the Azarot, if not that the Sanhedrin of 71 participates in them. How do we know this? The Pasuk says, and this is regarding in Parashat Truma, it says, it says that Moshe was commanded, all that I've shown you, the image of the Mishkan, and so you should do. Meaning, originally, when Moshe put up the Mishkan, so v'chein ta'asu, it says, so it shall be done in the future. Also, in order to add on to that kedusha, you would need also, like Moshe Rabbeinu, a court of 71. L'dorot haba'in, it refers to v'chein ta'asu is for the future generations. Mativ, Rav asked the question, but wait a second. Kol ha'kelim she'asa Moshe m'shichatan mekadshan. When Moshe made these kelim for the Mishkan, he would anoint them with a special oil to purify, to make them holy for service. But wait a second, the Braita says, from then on, after Moshe's time, if they made a new kli, the Braita says that the service itself would anoint it into service. V'amai, says the Gemara, but wait, I understand why that would be a distinction. Name of v'chein ta'asu l'dorot haba'in. You should say is that v'chein ta'asu means for future generations, be the same as Moshe did it with the oil. So the Gemara answers, Shani Yatam Damar Kra. No, there's a difference because the pasuk excludes that. It says Vayimshachem vayikadesh otam. It says Moshe anointed them specifically to sanctify them. Otam b'mshicha v'lo l'dorot b'mshicha. And it's an exclusion. A mi'ut to tell us only Moshe anointed into service that way, but not for future generations. Asks the Gemara, otam b'mshicha l'dorot. Maybe what it means to say is Moshe anointed it into service with oil. Future generations have a choice how to do it. There's another pasuk. It says in Bamidbar, it says Asher Yesharatu Bam Bakodesh. In the future, they shall be placed into service and making them holy. What does it mean? Hakatuv Tala'an B'Sheirut. It means Yeshartu, that through its service in the future will be made holy, not with the oil. So that's an exclusion. Elas, the Gemara says, okay, beautiful, but then if that's true, Otam Lamali, why do I need the original drasha of Otam? Elav Otam, if I didn't have that original drasha of Amin, I would have said L'Dorot B'Mshicha V'Avodah. Maybe future generations require both. You need both the anointing with oil and service. Dachti, because it says v'chein ta'asu, which implies a similarity. So katav rachman otam b'shicha v'lo l'dorot b'shicha. The pasuk therefore teaches us that only Moshe was done with oil, not future generations. Now the Mishnah told us v'enosin Sanhedrin chulei, that the lower courts of 23 are not made unless the court of 71 initiates that. Menalan, how do we know this? So Gemara says k'dashkachan b'Moshe uki Sanhedrin, just like Moshe Rabbeinu, who was the court of 71, made the lower courts. Moshe was like the court of 71. So too for future generations, those courts are appointed by the court of 71. Tan Rabbanan, says the Braita, minayin shema midin shoftim liYisrael. How do we know that the courts were set up for the Jewish people, the judges? Talmud Lomar, therefore in Shoftim it says, Shoftim Titein, you have to place judges for the Jewish people. Shotrim liYisrael minayin, how do we know that they would also set up enforcers? Talmud Lomar, therefore the pasuk says, Shotrim Titein, place Shotrim for the Jewish people. Shoftim l'chol shevet v'shevet. How do you know they would set up Shoftim for each shevet? Talmud Lomar, Shoftim l'shvatecha. It says Shoftim for each of your tribes. Shotrim l'chol shevet v'shevet. How do we know they also had these enforcers of the court in each shevet? Talmud Lomar, Shotrim l'shvatecha. Shoftim l'chol ir v'ir minayin. How do we know that they would set up judges for each city? Talmud Lomar, Shoftim b'chol l'sharecha. It says that they would put judges in each of your cities. Shotrim l'chol ir v'ir minayin. How do we know also Shotrim? Talmud Lomar, Shotrim l'sharecha. Rabbi Yehuda adds, Echad mimuneh al kulan, that the court of 71 was appointed over all of them, and they would make these courts function. Shenemar, like it says, Titen lecha, you shall place. Rav Shimon Gamliel Omer, he also adds, L'shvatecha v'shafatu, it says your tribes and they shall be judged, which is mitzvah b'shevet ladun et shifto, is that it's a mitzvah that each shevet is judged by his own court, not by someone else's court. The Mishnah told us that you can't adjudicate a case of Irani Dachat unless you have the court of 71. How do we know this? Amar B'chia Bar Yosef, Amar B'Yeshad, Amar Krak, as it says, V'otzeta ta'isha hi o et ta'isha hahu o et ta'isha hi. It says you bring out the man or the woman that did avodah zarah, means individuals are brought up to the court of 23. Which teaches ish v'isha tamotzi l'sharecha v'yat tamotzi kol ha'ir l'kula l'sharecha, but the entire city that sins in avodah zarah is adjudicated by a court of 71. We said in the Mishnah you cannot have an Irani Dachat and it's destroyed because they did avodah zarah at the border of Eretz Yisrael. Why? My taima, because it says in the pasuk in Re'eh, Mikirbecha Amar Rachman Avelo Min Asfar. It has to be something in your midst, but not at the border. The Mishnah also said velosh shalosh. It says you can't have 3 cities of Ir Nidachat. How do we know this? Because it says achat. First, it says 1 city is made into that. Avalosin achat o shtayim, but you could have 1 or 2. Like it says arecha, that's a plurality to teach you that 1 or 2 cities can be made into Ir Nidachat, but not 3. Tana Rabbanan the Braita elaborates on this. Achat, when it says achat in the pasuk, it means achat velosh shalosh. That only 1 city can be made into Ir Nidachat and not 3. Atom achat velosh shalosh oinu achat velosh shtayim. Maybe it means only 1 and not 2. Kishu Omer, therefore, when the pasuk says arecha, plurality, it says reish shtayim amor, that 2 could be made into Ir Nidachat. Rabani mekayem achat. So what's the exclusion of 1? Achat velosh shalosh, that 3 cannot be made into Ir Nidachat. Now, Zimne Omar Rav, sometimes version number 1, Rav used to say, that it's specifically if there's 1 Sanhedrin of 71 and it hasn't changed over, you can't have them make 3 cities of Ir Nidachat. But if they had the changeover, so then you could make 3 cities Ir Nidachat. Another version of Rav, even 2 or 3 courts of 71 cannot make 3 cities into Ir Nidachat. My time, Rav, what's the reasoning? Because it makes a bald spot in Eretz Yisrael. Reish Lakish continued. Lo shanu, this idea of not making 3 cities into Ir Nidachat is ela b'mkom echad. It's only 1 region. But if it's in different regions, you'll be allowed to. Rabbi Yochanan Amar enosin mishum korcha. Rabbi Yochanan says even in different regions, you would not be allowed to make 3 cities of Ir Nidachat. Tanaka batei Rabbi Yochanan. There's a braita that supports Rabbi Yochanan because it says enosin shalosh hayarot minudachot be'eretz Yisrael. You can't adjudicate 3 cities as Ir Nidachat in Israel. Avelosin otam shtayim, but you could make 2 of them into Ir Nidachat. Kigon achat b'Yehuda v'achat b'Galil. Meaning 1 in Yehuda and 1 in Galil. Avol shtayim b'Yehuda v'shtayim b'Galil. But to have more than that, to have 3, enosin you would not be allowed to do. Near the border, you can't even have 1. My time, what's the reason? Shema yishmeu nochrim, because maybe the goyim will hear v'yachriv Eretz Yisrael and they'll come and destroy Eretz Yisrael. They see some sort of a in to go and destroy Eretz Yisrael. Asks the Gemara, why are you saying a reasoning? We had a pasuk earlier. So the Gemara answers, Rabbi Shimon's the position of this Braita who darshans the reasoning behind the pasuk, meaning that he says, what's the reason it says B'kir B'cha? So there shouldn't be an opening for goyim to come and destroy Eretz Yisrael. Okay, now we had a machloket in the Mishnah, moving on to the next section, regarding the halachot that govern the Sanhedrin. So we said in the Mishnah, machloket, the Tanakama of the Mishnah said the Sanhedrin was 71, and Rabbi Yehuda said 70. So Sanhedrin Gdola Haita, 71. My time in Rabbanan, why do they say 71? My time in Rabbanan, the Amri Moshe al Gabein, that Moshe is included in the count of 70, so it's 71. So Amar Krak, as it says in Ba'alotecha, V'yityatzvu sham imach, turning to Yitzayin with Aleph. It says, they shall stand there with you. So what does it mean? The 70 plus Moshe is 71. Imach v'at ba'adayu, you together with them. Rabbi Yehuda says back, that's not what the pasuk is for. Rather, imach mishum shechina. It means they will stand outside of the Ohel Moed, the 70, because of the kavod of the shechina, they wouldn't go inside. It's a different drasha. Rabbanan Markra, the Rabbanan say, okay, but there's another pasuk. It says, v'nas'u itach b'masa'am. They will carry the burden of the people with you. Again, itach v'at ba'adayu, you with them, which is 71. Rabbi Yehuda says back, Itach b'domim lach. No, Itach teaches you that they have to be like you, which means they have to have yichus and they have to be free of blemishes. We'll discuss more of these qualifications later. The Rabbanan say back, no, I know that already because it says Hakel me'alecha v'nasu itach nafka. From this pasuk we derive the idea that they shall make it easier for you and carry with you, the idea that they have to have the same qualifications as Moshe. So therefore, that's written by the courts of 23. So if 23 have to have those qualifications, are 71, and therefore this verse v'nasu itach is to teach us that 71 is the number of the Sanhedrin. Tan Rabbanan. Now the Braita teaches us the story of Eldad and Medad. It says in the pasuk, Vayish'aru shnei anashim b'machaneh. This is in Ba'alotcha, that story there. There was 2 men that remained in the camp, and this was Eldad and Medad. So Yesh Omrim. Now the first pshat the Braita says is Bekal finished dire. They remained in the box. Now what does that mean? When Hashem said to Moshe, Israel, gather 70 men from the elders of Israel. Amar Moshe, Moshe said, what should I do? If I gather 6 from each of the 12 tribes, I'll have 72, too many people. If I gather 5 from each tribe, it'll only be 60, 10 lacking. So if I gather 6 from one and 5 from the other tribes, I'll create enmity. So Ma'asa, what did Moshe do? Birer shisha. He gathered 6 elders from each tribe. Ve'evi shivim v'shnayim pitakin, and he took 72 lots. Al shivim katav zaken. On 70 of them, he wrote the word zaken. V'shnayim iniach chalak, and 2 of them he left blank. Balalan v'natnan bekalfi, he mixed them together in a box. Amar lahem, he said to these zakenim, ba'u tlu pitakechem. Come and take a piece of paper. Anybody that picked out zaken, Amar kfar kitchecha shamayim, Hashem has sanctified you to be on the Sanhedrin. But mi shalab yado chalak, the one that took out the empty one, the blank one, Amar makom lachafetz becha ani ma'aseh lecha. Hashem doesn't want you, what should I do for you? Now the idea here is that these 2, Eldad and Medad, they left their papers in the box because they were scared they'd be rejected. The Gemara says, Kiyotze b'davar, similar idea. Ata Omer, you find, it says in Bamidbar, regarding the exchange of the Bechorim and the Leviim, it says, V'lekachta chamisha shkalim l'gulgolet. It says that the 273 on top of the 22,000 had to pay 5 shekel to exchange their kedusha. Amar Moshe said, what should I do? If I say you should pay your redemptive value, so the 273 will tell me, I was already redeemed on part of the 22,000. So Ma'asa, what did he do? He took 22,000 pieces of paper. And he wrote on them, son of a Levi. And 273 more, he wrote 5 shkalim. He put them in the box. Amar, he said, take these lots. The one that took out Ben Levi. So you were exchanged without paying your value. So you actually have to pay your value. This is all in the first pshat of Eldad and Medad. Rabbi Shimon adds a second pshat. He says, Machanen Ishtayro, it means they remained in the camp. What does it mean? When Hashem said, gather the 70 elders, Amru, Eldad Medad, Ein Anu Re'uyin Le'ota Gdula. Eldad and Medad were very humble, and they said, we're not fitting for that glory. So Hashem said, since you were humble here, I'll add on greatness to your greatness. And what greatness did he give them? Because the rest of the 70 Sanhedrin, their neviut eventually stopped. But their prophecy did not. Now what was the prophecy they were saying? So we have 3 pshatim. First pshat is Amru Moshe met Yoshua machnis et Yisrael la'aretz. They were saying Moshe is going to die and Yoshua is going to take the Jews into Israel. Abba Chanin Omer Mishum Eliezer. Abba Chanin says name Eliezer, a second pshat. Al eskei slav ein mitnabim. They were prophesying about the fatty birds, which is alluded to in the next section in the Torah. It says Ali slav, that the birds will ascend. The birds will ascend. Rav Nachman Omar Al eskei Gog uMagog hayim mitnabim. They were prophesying about the ultimate, in the end of days, the war of Gog uMagog. Shenemar, like it says in Yechezkel, Ko Amar Hashem Elokim. So says Hashem Elokim. Ha'atahu asher dibarti b'yamim kadmonim. Are you the one that spoke that I spoke about in the earlier days? B'yad avdi nevi'ei Yisrael, in the hands of my prophets of Israel. Hanib'im b'yamim ahem shanim, that prophesied in those days and years. Laviotach aleim, to bring you on them. V'gomer. Al tikri shanim, don't read it as if it's years, al shnayim, the 2. Ve'ezu hein shnayim nevi'im shenitnavu beperek echad nevuah echad. Who are the prophets? 2 prophets that prophesied the same time, the same matter. Ve'omer Eldad uMedad, so you see it's alluded to in Yechezkel, they prophesied about Gog uMagog. Now we said in the Braita, that they had this greatness that their prophecies continued, even though the 70 elders, their prophecies stopped. How do we know that the 70 elders, their prophecies stopped? If it's based on the pasuk that says it says they prophesied and they did not yasafu, and we're assuming yasafu means continue. The problem with that is by Har Sinai it says it says a great voice and it shall not. Now if you learn continue, does it mean it didn't continue? Of course it did continue. Hashem's voice continued. It means that it didn't stop. So therefore over here too it would be the same thing. I'll tell you the proof. Regarding the 70 it says they prophesied in the past. But regarding Eldad and Medad it says it says they are prophesying plural in the future, means they're continuing to prophesize. Asks the Gemara between these three pshatim. Bishlam lamanda amar Moshe met. Hainu dichtiv Adoni Moshe kilaim. I understand, according to the first shita, they said Moshe is going to die. So I understand why Yeshua said, my master Moshe killed them or destroyed them, because he was saying something, they were saying negative things against Moshe. But the second and third pshat, they were prophesying about the Slav and Gog and Magog. Why was Yeshua saying to Moshe to destroy them? The answer is because it wasn't derech eretz. It was like a student saying halacha in front of his Rebbe, in front of Moshe Rabbeinu, so it wasn't appropriate. According to the second and third answers, so I understand why Moshe said, Halavai, they should all be prophets. But according to the first shita, they were saying Moshe is going to die. Did he appreciate this prophecy? So the Gemara answers, he didn't hear the end of what Yeshua was saying, so he didn't know what he was going to conclude. My claim, what does it mean that Yeshua said destroy them? Amarle atel aleim. Amar he said to them, so Yeshua said to Moshe, Yeshua said, put on them the authority of the public so that they have to work and then they'll be destroyed on their own. Different pshatim said in this. Let's continue. The Mishnah told us that the court of 23 is deduced because we have Eidah, which is 10, and then Eidah is 10, and we 9 Lavi Od Shlosha, we add another 3, because you need, as the psukim imply, to have in the negativity, to make someone liable, an additional 2. So therefore, from this we deduce you can't have an odd number, an even number, so therefore it has to be 23. The Gemara says, Sof, at the end of the day, L'ral Pishnayim Lo Mishkachatla. How do you find that 23 is tilted to the side of negativity by 2? Because if you have 11 saying innocent and 12 saying guilty, katicharu, there's only one and you can't make the guy guilty. And if 10 are saying innocent and 13 are saying guilty, so you have 3 on the side of guilty. How do you have 2? Regarding the court of 23, it could happen if you add, because one abstains, so if you add 2 more, you could possibly have 2 on the side of negativity. Over Sanhedrin Gdola, regarding the great Sanhedrin, meaning of the Sanhedrin Gdola, so you could actually have without adding, because even in a court of 70, it could be 36 versus 34, but according to Rabbi Yehuda. But Rabbi Avo continues talking about qualifications now. Before that. When you add on, so you make a even court lechatchila, means you're allowed to add on if one abstains, so you're going to add 2 more to 22, which will make an even number of 24. So the Gemara says, that's obvious. You may have said, you might say like this, the guy who abstains is not removed from the court. Maybe if he says, I'm going to listen to him. That if somebody says, I don't know, he's removed. And if he says something reasonable, we don't listen to what he has to say. Now, Amar Rav Kana says, Sanhedrin Shiro Kulan Lechova. If the Sanhedrin see everybody is on the side of negativity, they're all against the litigant. So Potrinoto, you have to let this guy off. You have to exonerate him. My time, what's the reason? Since we know that in order to put someone to death, they have to sleep overnight on it. But here, no one's going to see his innocence because everyone's on the side of guilty. So they won't see it anymore. Therefore, you have to exonerate this guy. Says the Gemara, qualifications of the Sanhedrin. And this seems to be, seemingly, both for the higher Sanhedrin and lower one, 71 and 23. They have to be tall, wise, imposing appearance, elderly, and also they know how to combat black magic. They have to know 70 languages. So they shouldn't hear the testimony of the witnesses through a translator, because that would be an issue of 8 Amar B'Yehuda Amar Rav, Ein Moshivim Sanhedrin El Mi Sheyodea L'Taret Hasheretz Min HaTorah. Rav Yehuda Amar Rav said, you can't put on the Sanhedrin unless somebody is so smart that based on the Torah he'd be able to say a sheretz, which is tamei, is really tahor. Amar Rav, so Rav commented, Ani adun v'atarenu. I could calculate, make a cheshbon and purify it. If a snake which kills with its venom and increases tumah in the world tahor, but its corpse is considered pure, so sheretz she'eino mamimit umar bet tumah, a sheretz, like these little creatures which cannot kill and increase tumah in the world, eino din she'yehit tahor, so certainly it should be considered tahor. But the Gemara says it's not a good kal v'chomer, because velohi, mi'idi dehava akotz ba'alma, a thorn could also kill somebody, increase tumah, but it's not going to contaminate. So therefore you see that clearly the ability to increase tumah is not contingent on its ability to contaminate in the future. Amar Rav Yehuda Rav continues. Kol ir she'ein ba shnayim ledaber ve'echad lishmoa. If you don't have a city, in a city, you don't have two people who could speak the 70 languages and one who could understand it at least. Ein moshivin ba Sanhedrin. So you can't have a Sanhedrin of 23 in that city. Or Beitar b'shlosha. There were 3 people in Beitar who could speak 70 languages. Or b'Yavna arba, and in Yavna they had 4 of these people. Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Akiva, these 3 chachamim. V'Shimon HaTimni dan lefneim bekarker. Shimon HaTimni also did, but he was a student who sat on the ground in front of them. He wasn't on their level yet. Meid Tevei says the Gemara question against Rab, because the Braita says Shlishit Chochma, that if the 3 people who could speak 70 languages considered chakama, it's a beit din that is very intelligent, meaning it's considered effective. Revi'it ein l'mal lahemen. And if there's 4 people who speak 7 languages, there's nothing greater than that. But you see, you need 3 and not 2 who speak 70 languages. The Gemara answers, Huidamar ke'atana d'tanya shniya chakama. So Rav holds like the following Braita. It says you have 2 of them who speak 7 languages, that's a wise court. Shlishit ein l'mal lahemen, 3, it's considered even greater. Now, the Gemara moves on and tells us now the different catchphrases the Gemara uses, who it's referring to. Lemeidin lefnei chachamim, when it says those who learn in front of the sages, Levi mireb means Levi who used to learn from Rebbe. Danin lefnei chacham, those who calculate in front of the rabbis. It means Shimon ben Azai, v'Shimon ben Zoma, v'Chanan ha-Mitzri, v'Chanan ben Chachinai. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak matni chamish. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak added 1 more rabbi, which was Shimon b'Shimon. The Shimon bet is the 3rd one, is Shimon HaTimni, which is added. Chanan v'Chananya are the same as before. Rabboteinu shebavel, when it says the rabbis in Bavel, that refers to Rav Shmuel. Rabboteinu sheberetz Yisrael, that refers to Rabbi Abba. Dayanei Gola, the judges of the exile Karna. Dayanei Eretz Yisrael, it's Rabbi Yami v'Ravasi. Dayanei de Pumpadita, the judges of Pumpadita, that's Rav Papa bar Shmuel. Dayanei de Narda, that's Rav Ada bar Menyumi. Sabi de Surah, the elders of Surah, that's Rav Huna Rav Chizda. Sabi de Pumpadita, that's Rav Yudah Rav Eina. Charifa de Pumpadita, the sharp ones of Pumpadita, that's Efa v'Avimai b'nei Rachava. Amorai de Pumpadita, that refers to Rabbi Rav Yosef. Amorai de Nardai refers to Rav Chama. Narbalai, the Naharbalian, that Matnu, when it says that he taught Rami Bar Yosef, Bar Rebbe, it refers to Rami Bar Rebbe. Amri Be Rav, when it says it was said in the Beit Midrash of Rav, it means Rav Huna, because he was a primary student. Rav Huna, Amri Be Rav. But sometimes we find Rav Huna says Amri Be Rav. Ella Rav Hamnuna. When he says that, it means a different student, which was Rav Hamnuna. Amri B'Marava, when it says it was said in the west, Rabbi Yirmiyah refers to Rabbi Yirmiyah. Shalchu mitam, they sent from there, from Eretz Yisrael, that's Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina. Machaku alav Marava, it says they scoffed at this in the west, that's Rabbi Lazar. Asks the Gemara, Shalchu mitam l'divrei Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina. It says they sent from there according to Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina. That sounds like somebody else, Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina. So El Epoch, switch it around. Shalchu mitam refers to Rabbi Elazar. Machaku alav Marava is Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina. Now, the end of the Mishnah, the Machloket, how many members have to be in a city to be ra'oi, fitting for a court of 23? So Tanakama said 120. What is the significance of 120? So the Gemara says like this: 23 is parallel to the number for the Sanhedrin Ketana itself of 23. 3 more rows of students in front of them of 23 each. Harei tish'im betarti is 92. You need 10 people dedicated to be there for the minyanim and shul. Harei me'avitrei, that's 102. Vishnei sofrim, you need 2 court scribes, Vishnei chazanin, and 2 attendants in the court, Vishnei ba'alei dinin, and 2 potential litigants, Vishnei edim, 2 witnesses, Vishnei zomin, and 2 people who could incriminate those witnesses, Vishnei zomei zomin, and 2 who could incriminate the zomamin. Harei me'av arbei, that's 114. Tanya in the Braita adds, Kol ir she'en ba'asara dvarim alalu ein talmid chacham rashai lador b'tocha. If you have a city without these 10 things, the talmid chacham is not allowed to live inside of it. 1 is a beit din makin va'onchin, a beit din that hits and punishes. 2, kupash shel tzedakah negvet b'shnayim mitchaleket b'shlosha. The tzedakah, the charity fund, is collected with 2 and distributed by 3 people. 2 plus 3 is 5. That's already the number 5. Ubeit HaKnesset, and the ashul. Ubeit HaMerchatz, a bathhouse. Ubeit HaKisei, a bathroom. Rofeh, uman v'lavlar, umelamed tinokot. A doctor, a bloodletter, Dr. Rashi says, is also a mohel. Lavlar is a sofer to write svarim, and a teacher of children. So Rashi learns that adds the 6th one, all of those jobs together. Mishum Rabbi Akiva amru af minei pera, and in the name of Rabbi Akiva said also you can't live in a city without different types of fruits. Minei pera me'erin et ha'einayim, because they light a person's eyes up. So we add another 6 based on this. 3 and 2 of the ones who gathered tzedakah, 3 who distribute it, and 1 more who was the jack of all trades as we list, that's 120. Rabbi Nechemia said 230. We said Keneged Sarei Asarim, that the lowest level of court that Yitro mentioned was the officers, the judges, over 10 people. So to have 230 members, you have a court of 23. Tani the Braita adds, Rebbe Omer is a third shita, Yidchet Mud Aleph now, Matayim v'shivim v'shiva. You need 277 people in a city to have a Sanhedrin. Sanhedrin Ketana, a 23-person court. Aiva Tani Rebbe Omer Matayim Shivim V'Shmona. He says 278. So is it 277 or 278? Lokashi HaReb Yehuda HaRabanan. 277 reflects the position of Reb Yehuda. So 278 is the Rabbanan. Why? Because like this. The halacha is, if you have the 23-person court and they're not agreeing, one of them abstains, so you have to add on 2 members. Now you can only add on up to the number of the Sanhedrin Gdolah, which is 70 according to Rabbi Yehuda, 71 according to the Rabbanan, which would mean another 47 members have to be in the city according to Rabbi Yehuda, 48 according to the Rabbanan. So therefore add that to the total of 230, because Rebbe actually holds like the position of Rabbi Nechemia, and therefore you come to 277 or 278. Tzan Rabbanan says the Braita, the Pasuk tells us in the Midbar, V'samta aleim sarei alafim, sarei meot, sarei chamishim, v'sarei asarot, that there were officers, judges, placed over 1,000, 150, and 10. So sarei alafim sheish meot, there were, of 600,000 people, there were sarei alafim, officers over 1,000, which were 600 of them. Sarei meot, officers over 100, was sheishet alafim, 6,000. Sarei chamishim, officers over 50, shnei masar elef, 12,000. Sarei asarot, officers over 10, sheishet ribo, is 60,000. So if you add it all together, 600 plus 6,000 plus 12,000 plus 60,000, that there were of the judges in Israel over the Jewish people in the Midbar, there were Shiv'at Ribo v'Shmonet Alafim, there were 78,000 v'Sheish Meot, and 600 judges appointed over the different levels of the Jewish people in the Midbar. Baruch Hashem, we finished the first chapter of Masechet Sanhedrin, and Be'ezrat Hashem will continue in this wonderful Masechta, and again, our learning is as a refuah shlema, for a speedy recovery of Yaakov ben Dinah. Everyone should have a wonderful week. Shavua Tov and all the best.